Theron was known as the Donkey Boy, a cruel name given by the townsfolk after he had been publicly humiliated for breaking a sacred vase. The magistrates had decreed his punishment, to wear donkey ears made of leather and serve water to the citizens for 30 days, as a reminder that foolishness deserved mockery. He had been innocent. The vase had fallen not by his hand, but by the wind that swept through the market that morning. Still, no one cared for a poor boy's truth. In Athens, reputation mattered more than truth, and humility was the price of being powerless. Each day, he passed through the agora, where philosophers debated wisdom and merchants haggled over olives and cloth. Children pointed and giggled, women whispered behind their veils. "There goes the donkey boy," they said. Theron bowed his head and walked faster. One afternoon, as the sun sank lower, a gentle voice stopped him. "Boy," it said, "bring me some water." The speaker was an old man in a plain white robe, seated near the steps of the temple. His face was kind but weathered, and his eyes seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Theron hesitated, expecting mockery, but the old man's tone carried no cruelty. He poured water into a clay cup and offered it with trembling hands. The man drank, then smiled. "You serve humbly, even in shame. Tell me, why do you bow to those who mock you?" Theron looked away. "Because I must. The city commands it." "Ah," said the old man, nodding. "Then the city is blind. A man's worth is not measured by his punishment, but by how he endures it." Theron said nothing. He simply turned to leave, but the man called after him. "Return tomorrow, boy. I have work that might suit a heart like yours." The next morning, Theron came. The old man led him beyond the city walls, to a small grove of olive trees. There, a group of young men and women sat listening as he spoke of virtue, justice, and compassion. His words flowed like water over stones, soft yet powerful. "This," he told them, "is the essence of wisdom, to do good not for reward or praise, but because goodness itself is its own freedom." Theron listened from the back, hiding his donkey ears beneath his hood. But the old man noticed. "You there," he said gently. "Why hide what others see? The world may shame your face, but it cannot touch your soul." The boy froze, his throat tight. "You don't understand," he whispered. "They laugh. They spit. I am nothing." The man's eyes softened. "I am Socrates," he said quietly. "And I, too, have known laughter that cut like a blade." Theron's eyes widened. Everyone in Athens knew the name. Socrates, the philosopher accused of corrupting the youth and defying the gods. Yet here he sat, humble as a beggar, teaching under the open sky. Socrates continued, "They call me foolish because I ask questions they fear to answer. But tell me, who is more foolish, the one who admits his ignorance, or the one who mocks what he does not understand?" Theron felt a stirring inside him, something bright and painful. For the first time in weeks, he lifted his head. Days turned into weeks. Theron visited Socrates every morning before his duties, listening to lessons about virtue and the soul. Slowly, he began to change. When others jeered, he no longer flinched. He learned to smile, softly, without bitterness. One day, as he carried water through the market, he saw a woman trip and spill her basket of figs. The crowd laughed at her clumsiness, but Theron knelt quietly, helping her gather each piece. She hesitated, seeing his donkey ears, but then her eyes softened. "Thank you," she whispered. Most would have laughed. Theron smiled. "Laughter doesn't fill the heart," he said. "Kindness does." That night, Socrates asked him, "Tell me, boy, what do you think is the worst punishment in Athens?" Theron thought for a moment. "To be mocked by others," he said. Socrates shook his head. "No. The worst punishment is to lose one's compassion. For when a man no longer feels kindness, he is more chained than any prisoner." Theron pondered his words. He began to notice how cruelty passed from one person to another like a plague, how those who mocked him had once been mocked themselves. It was a cycle of shame, spinning endlessly. And then, something unexpected happened. The 30 days of his punishment ended. He went before the magistrates to remove the donkey ears. The crowd gathered, waiting to laugh one last time. But when the official reached to untie the straps, Theron stopped him. "No," he said quietly. "Let them stay." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The magistrate frowned. "You wish to keep them?" "Yes," said Theron. "If these ears remind me to listen to others before judging them, then they are not a curse, they are a gift." The square fell silent. Even those who had mocked him stood still, unsure how to react. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, an old man's voice rose. "Well spoken, boy." It was Socrates. He stepped forward, smiling proudly. "Athens punishes with shame, but wisdom turns shame into light." The people watched as Theron walked through the marketplace, his head high, the donkey ears glinting in the sun. The laughter that once followed him was replaced by whispers of respect. Some even bowed their heads as he passed. Months later, when the news spread that Socrates had been sentenced to death, Theron stood among the crowd outside the prison. The city had turned against its wisest man, branding him a corrupter and traitor. When the guards allowed visitors, Theron entered the dim cell where Socrates sat calmly, a cup of hemlock before him. "They say you could escape," Theron whispered. "There are men who would help you flee tonight." Socrates smiled faintly. "If I fled, I would betray my own teachings. And if I die, perhaps my death will awaken something greater in others." Tears filled Theron's eyes. "You taught me not to fear shame. But how can I not fear losing you?" Socrates reached out, placing a trembling hand on the boy's shoulder. "You have not lost me. Every act of kindness, every moment of courage, you keep me alive through those." Theron fell to his knees, sobbing. "They called you a fool. And perhaps I am," Socrates said gently. "But even a fool can teach wisdom if his heart is true." When Socrates drank the poison, silence filled the cell. The philosopher's eyes closed peacefully, as though he were falling into a deep and forgiving sleep. Theron left that night with a heart heavy yet full of light. The city mourned quietly, ashamed of what it had done. People began to whisper not of Socrates the rebel, but of Socrates the teacher, the man who taught compassion even to those who punished him. Years passed. Theron grew into a man. He opened a small school under the same olive trees where he had once listened as a boy. There, he taught children of all classes, not from scrolls, but from stories. He told them of the donkey ears. Of the cruel laughter. Of the man who turned humiliation into wisdom. "Do you know what the most humiliating punishment of ancient Greece was?" he asked his students one day. They shook their heads. "It was not to be mocked," Theron said softly. "It was to forget that every person, even the humiliated, carries the spark of the divine." He touched the leather ears, still hanging by his side, cracked and faded with time. "These taught me that shame is only a mirror. What you see in it depends on your heart." One of the children, a small girl with bright eyes, raised her hand. "Master Theron," she asked, "did they ever stop laughing at you?" Theron smiled gently. "Some did. Some didn't. But that no longer mattered. Because when you stop hating those who hurt you, their laughter loses its power." He looked out over the olive grove, where sunlight danced through the leaves. Socrates once said that the unexamined life is not worth living. I think he meant that to live without kindness, to walk through life without compassion, is the greatest emptiness of all. The children sat quietly, listening. The world seemed to pause for a moment, the air filled with peace. Theron closed his eyes, hearing the distant echoes of a voice long gone. "The city punishes," Socrates had said, "but the heart redeems." And in that moment, he understood that what began as his greatest humiliation had become his greatest strength. For in enduring shame with grace, he had discovered the purest form of freedom, the freedom of the soul. Years later, when Theron's own time came, the people of Athens gathered beneath the olive trees to honor him. They called him the kind teacher, the listener, the healer of hearts. As the sun set over the city, a gentle wind carried the scent of olives and dust through the streets where once the donkey boy had walked. And though his body was gone, his lesson remained, whispered from parent to child, from friend to friend. That kindness is not weakness. That compassion is not shame. And that even in the cruelest of punishments, the human spirit can rise, unbroken, forgiving, and infinitely free. And so, the story of Theron, the donkey boy who learned wisdom through humiliation, became one of the most cherished tales of Greece. A story not of punishment, but of redemption. Because sometimes, the most humiliating punishments do not destroy us. They reveal who we truly are.